And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show. So today I am joined by Chris Chipman, and known colloquially on the internet as the Chippa.
How's it going, man?
Good, and you?
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, so we'll start off with the standard, who you are and what you do.
Okay. Well, for those that are just finding me through this podcast, and if you do, I hope you're enjoying hearing me for the first time. And if you're coming to this podcast because you know me, please give this guy a subscribe and dig into all the stuff he has to offer. I think it's great. Um, me, I'm Chris Chipman. I'm 34. I live in Lynn, Massachusetts. I have for most of my life. I went to UMass Lowell for college, where I studied to be a mechanical engineer. That's what I do for the day job. Worked at the same company for about 11 years. Got my master's degree while working there. But grew up with the movie Bob, my brother Bob Chipman. If you guys have ever heard of him, that's probably how you found me. And kind of grew up with a love of movies, video games, everything geek culture related. You know, we grew up through the golden age, as it were, of the Spielberg era 1980s, Atari 2600, NES, Super NES, all the way to now. And, just kind of liking this newfound about a year into doing my own stuff on the internet. I'm really enjoying it. I enjoy finding fans like you, my good friend. So I appreciate that. That was a first for me. I've plenty of people have come up and said they love my brother, but it's the first time anyone's ever come up to me and recognized me from this and wanted to have me on their show. So I thought that was really cool. And thank you for that. It really made my day. Actually, made my year so far.
You're welcome. So yeah, how were you first introduced to like video games?
So man, that takes us back a long time. So I have a pretty good memory. It actually kind of scares my family a lot. Things I remember, but I'd say first memory of games has to be about maybe 3 years old if I'm remembering back far enough. My dad had a Commodore 64 and an Atari 2600, and he had a ton of games. And we used to sit as a family in front of our old Magnavox 10 channel turn TV. It was color, but it was still a pretty old TV. Still had a remote that hooked up to it with a cord. As weird as this may seem to some of the younger viewers or listeners on this, but we'd play the Atari 2600, and I mean we had everything, including the games like the Brick Breaker and things like that had the different controller. And man, we played that thing to death as a family, and that was kind of how I got introduced to games. It wasn't a single person sitting alone playing them, but we were playing single player games as a family. So it'd be hand the controller off to try another level of Donkey Kong or Pitfall or Pac-Man, and that was fantastic. Move forward a teeny tiny bit. We had cousins in our family on both sides that like the big thing you do at the holidays was go over somebody's house for a family event. And all the kids would go down the basement, and they were the first people we knew that had a Nintendo Entertainment System. So we'd go and, play like Kid Icarus and The Legend of Zelda and Mario and all these other games and Duck Hunt. And we just had to have this thing. And again, I was 3 or 4, so I remember this kind of through my brother. My brother was kind of the one more playing the games, and I was just kind of sitting there watching at 3 or 4 years old, because Bob's 3 years older than me. So we got an NES. It was probably 1987, 1988. I'd say it was when he first got his NES. And, in come the games. We had everything. And funny thing is, I remember at 4 years old, and this must have been that my family entered both me and my brother into a contest at the local Star Market to win a Nintendo. And they had gotten him one for his birthday. And I remember being really jealous, even though, we slept in the same room. We only had one TV downstairs, but I was jealous that I didn't have one, you know? And the Star Market called up my house because I guess we had won. And my parents put my name in. So here I am at 4 years old getting a call from the manager at Star Market to tell me I won a Nintendo. So we ended up with two in the house, and that's how we ended up with one on an even older TV in our bedroom, which I thought was kind of interesting. So as far as my first introduction, that's the majority of the story. I don't know if you want me to go more in depth and get into individual games, or seems like we could talk about that more. But um, you know, you also go from NES to Super NES. We weren't a Genesis household. We weren't a Sega household. So my brother, is very strongly Nintendo centric. But at the time, and I don't know if you had this experience, but others who are a bit younger and kind of in the more Microsoft and Nintendo and Sony generation, they're kind of each mutually exclusive now. There seems like there's less of a fight to me these days, but it was really you're a Nintendo guy or you're a Sega guy back in the day. And it was almost like the commercials like battled. You know what I mean? The mascots battled, and PlayStation even kind of did this too when they first came out. So it was almost blasphemous to even say you liked a Genesis game if people around you were Nintendo fans. So like I could only really play the Sega games, and Sega had the Mortal Kombats with the actual blood cheat code, and the Sonic the Hedgehogs and the things that were considered more edgy at the time. And so I didn't have as much of a background for those younger as I did for the large multitude of Nintendo games. And if you want to take it further outside of the house, I don't know. Do you want to keep this to consoles or?
If you have, I mean, by all means, go ahead.
All right, because it kind of it reaches outside, right? Again, for some of the younger people listening, the exposure you might have to an arcade these days is like a Dave and Buster's, which is fine. I like that Dave and Buster's is keeping it going, but that's more like the pay to play to get tickets, type arcade games. I'm talking like the arcade that would be in the back room of like the bar that your parents went to, kind of arcades. There's one, you're probably familiar with Salem Willows, right?
Yes.
Being local. So Salem Willows is a wonderful place that still kind of carries that torch of, having some of the more old school games. It's not, the greatest arcade in the world, but it's awesome. And a lot of the games they have there are still the games that were there when I was a kid. So that's a lot of fun. But, I cut my teeth on a lot of that, like the 6-person arcade box, like X-Men and Captain America and Simpsons, Ninja Turtles type games, and the old pinball machines. And Revolution X was another big one when I was a little older. And there's a place up in Laconia, New Hampshire, called Fun Spot. That's actually the American Classic Arcade Museum, and they've been in the movie The King of Kong: A Fistful of Quarters. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And people listening, it's a great movie to see. It's about a guy named Steve Wiebe who loses his job and decides to play an old beat up Donkey Kong machine that he has, and ends up going against the guy holding the world record, and uncovers a seedy underbelly of video game scorekeepers. And it's very strange, and it's a true story, and it's a hell of a documentary actually made by the guy who made Horrible Bosses, as weird of a piece of trivia as that is. But yeah, so that's kind of like if you go from my childhood, that's kind of the era I was living in. The smoky arcades, the home video game consoles, Atari 2600, Nintendo, kind of the apex of the home video game era is where I grew up. So that's that story.
Okay, and what would you say was your favorite game or games when you were growing up?
Oh, that's an interesting one because it kind of, I look at growing up as far as video games are concerned as a few different eras, right? I had the NES and SNES, so you've got your Mario series, Zelda series, Castlevania. There was a game on NES that I loved. It was one of the furthest back I can remember calling Nintendo's helpline to get info on how to beat it was Wizards and Warriors. You ever play this one?
I don't think I've heard of it.
So you're a guy running around in a knight costume, um, and it's just a platformer. But in each level, you have to find keys to unlock the doors to get to the next section. And there's a bit where you're in like a lava cave, and you have to get this potion that flies through the air. And if you don't get it the first time, it's wrong for the rest of it. It's the glitch in the game, and you basically have to restart the game. And so there's a way around it, and I don't remember what it was to this day, but you would have to call the Nintendo helpline, and they'd say, "Okay, leave the game on and wait like 25 minutes and just let it keep recycling." And it was chaos, and that was one of the games I remember really playing as a family. Um, because you'd have my mom and my dad. No, 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 the key's over there. Come on, you already did it. And so there's that one. It was an old NES game. It was probably like 88 or 89 kind of year release. Marble Madness, is that a game you ever heard of before?
I think I've heard of it. I don't think I've played it.
So that's another from the Nintendo era. It was an arcade game that they ported to NES and actually did a fantastic job. And it used the space ball type of control that the arcades would do, where they basically had a cue ball from a pool game, like in the center,
Mm-hmm.
and you moved marble around these like 2.5D worlds. And the physics for being an NES game were quite interesting. You had to move it faster and move it in reverse to get the ball to slow down. And even to this day, if I go up to Fun Spot, I drop, $5 or $10 into that game. It's nearly impossible to beat. I can probably only get to level 5, and I consider myself pretty good at it. So there's that. There's the classic beer tapper. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one, but
I think thanks to Wreck-It Ralph, I have.
there you go. So most of the places you can find it now, it's root beer tapper, but it was actually an arcade game branded by Budweiser called Budweiser Beer Tapper, and Mario, or a guy who looked a lot like Mario, was the guy serving the beer, and you just serve people. And it's hard, classic quarter-eaten arcade game, and still to this day one of my favorites. And then you've got your Contras, Gradius, Life Force. Those were my big NES and arcade era games. But then I went ahead and committed blasphemy as far as my brother was concerned at the time. But I really wanted a PlayStation, and I really wanted a PlayStation because I couldn't get Final Fantasy games on Nintendo systems anymore. And so Final Fantasy VII came out, and I asked for a PlayStation for Christmas. And that was like really my, when you're sitting in school and you got a notebook and you're drawing like the logos of all your favorite games on the back, like that was my era, my PlayStation era. I had, Final Fantasy VII, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Metal Gear Solid, all the Resident Evil games, Silent Hill. That was like my big, deep games that took a lot of my time. I wanted to play RPGs. I wanted to play story-based shooters and things like that. Then after that, I've committed even more blasphemy and got a Sega system with the Dreamcast and invested a good year and a half of my life into Shenmue and Soul Calibur. And then I got to college and, got into Counter-Strike and Half-Life and Battlefield 1942, things like that. So it's been pretty varied, but it's kind of stuck with that consistent. I've had a good mix of games that are quick pick up and play and games that kind of invest a lot of time. But, you know, um, what's really won out in like what I've played consistently over the years have been the pick up and plays, your Marios, your Tony Hawks. I got big into Rock Band. I bought an Xbox 360 just so I could have Rock Band. I had friends that worked for Harmonix, which was the company that Activision owned that made those games. And I always liked, the idea of those. They were a lot of fun. So yeah, those are my favorites. So what about you? Did any of those fall into your category of favorite game, or have I missed something?
I was born slightly later into the game cycle. In terms of NES and SNES, those were always the ones my brother had. The first console I ever had of my very own was the GameCube,
Excellent.
And I remember it very well. On a Saturday just before my 13th birthday party, my parents bought me a copy of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door,
Oh yeah.
and that was probably the very first game I ever really fell in love with, because the idea of like Mario but with characters and a story and things happening in it.
Have you ever played Super Mario RPG? Because I know the Paper Mario games are kind of the spiritual successor to that.
Yeah. So a few years ago, my brother like pretty much bequeathed me his Wii, and I took ready advantage of the virtual console. And once I realized what Super Mario RPG was, I downloaded that, and goodness me, it was quite an experience playing that the first time.
Oh, it's an amazing game, but it's very jarring though to see those characters in that type of setting. I remember at the time when it came out, and God, it would have been on my favorite games list if I had actually thought of it. And you bringing up Paper Mario just jarred my memory. I remember playing through that with Bob, and just being completely amazed because I was like you say you were 13ish when Paper Mario came out, and I was probably 10 or 11 when Super Mario RPG came out, and it I hadn't really played that many RPGs, outside of like Legend of Zelda, which was kind of more the adventure RPG kind of thing. So to have Mario kind of slow down and be at that turn-based style was very out there and very different. And having a story in and of itself was very cool. So yeah. Then there's also Earthbound. I always forget that Earthbound exists because I didn't play it when it was first out on the SNES. I've only played Earthbound for the first time on SNES Classic. As funny as that is. Have you dug into Earthbound at all?
Yes, I played through it a while ago, back in the day when it was available on the Wii U's Virtual Console.
Right. I remember when it came out on the Virtual Console. That was literally a month after a friend of mine's girlfriend had bought him like $180 copy of the SNES game from like a resale store because it was so hard to find. And then it came out for $10 in the Virtual Console. But yeah, that game lived up to the hype. That was as good as everybody my whole life made it out to be.
Yep.
I mean, and those are the games I always kind of go to. There's definitely been the Silent Hills in there, the Resident Evils, the Metal Gears, for me. Um, but I guess you know, I've always kind of gone for the more light, silly, strange, kind of stuff rather than the ultra realistic. I've got them. I've got the, you know, uh, Call of Duty, couple of those games because people played them online and they wanted me to play with them and Battlefields and those. But they just don't do the same thing for me that the Mario games or the Crash Bandicoots or the Spyros, um, Donkey Kong Country, Banjo Kazooie. Those kind of games are kind of my bread and butter, as it were.
Hmm.
So yeah, those are favorite games throughout life or growing up. That was those.
Yeah. And what would you say are games you've become fond of in the present?
So yeah, um, see everything in column A that I already talked about, of course. But in recent time, a game that's just struck me, staggeringly is like, okay, wow. I was missing this for a while. Is uh, you know, having kids. I didn't think after Wii I was gonna own another video game system just because of lack of time. And then my wife and I got married, and someone got us a Wii U as a gift. And I'm like, oh, awesome! Now I can check out what's going on this thing. It plays all my Wii games. And I had Rock Band 3 was like the last Xbox game I got, and so I have that. My friends would come over. We have a party. We throw on Rock Band, have a good time. That's been kind of the game of my adult life, let's say. Um, but you know then I got the Wii U, and it's like, okay, cool, I can get, these games that I hadn't didn't think I was going to get a chance to get. So I got, Mario Maker. Mario Maker I invested a ton of time in on the Wii. Did you ever get a chance to play that?
Oh yes.
It's just wonderful, right? And I keep forgetting I have it, and I keep going back to it because it's just so much fun. And then no thinking that, okay, Wii U, this is the last thing I'm going to get. I never thought I'd end up with a Switch, so I brought Breath of the Wild on Wii U, and I'm probably 50, 60 hours into that game. I'm just about to head into the castle and go after Ganon, and I'm hoping it's as amazing as the rest of the game was, because that is just a wonderful game, and it's the first time since probably Wind Waker that I've invested that much time into a single game. So it's quite some time, right? That
Yeah.
I've been very casual gamer up till then, and that game has really grabbed me. And then a couple months later or a year later or so, I get a Switch, and again as a gift. And so now I'm, Super Mario Odyssey is just a wonderful game, start to finish. They've
Oh yeah.
refined that formula down to the point where it's just easy. It seems that it's effortlessly great. Like the
Mm-hmm.
controls are perfect, the visuals are perfect, the world is perfect. It feels open world like the Galaxy games did, but it still feels level based like the older games. It's just a perfect mix, in my opinion. And I love that they're doing the multiplayer side scroller ones, or half 3D side scroller ones. And I guess they're rebringing that game out on the Switch as well, so that'll be cool. I've also recently, and I haven't got to invest as much time into it, but I'm completely enthralled with Labo. And that might seem weird, from a hardcore gamer might look at that and go, well, that's just for kids. And again, I'm a Nintendo guy, but I like things. I'm an engineer. I like things I can touch. I like things I can play with. And the fact that Labo is encouraging you to take your game and turn it into something physical that you can interact with amazes me. And whoever at Nintendo had the idea that we can sell someone a game and charge them an extra $10 for cardboard and have it work as well as it does, it just, I'm in love with it. And I hope that when my kids get a little older, that's something I can play with them. Because I think it's really cool. Have you had a chance to mess with Labo at all?
Uh, no, unfortunately, but I'm
I
hoping
I
sometime
highly
soon.
recommend it. It's very unique. It's very different. Um, and they're starting to make it work with a lot. Like, I guess you can use the racing car controllers you build to play Mario Kart,
Oh yeah, I've heard about
which
that.
which is cool. And then outside of that, in the current, I've got Smash Brothers. I skipped the Wii U version of it because um, I felt that I had already beaten that game to death on the GameCube, or the Wii, sorry. And I heard the single player in this was really strong, so I picked it up and I'm loving it. And I just got Mega Man 11, and I know that a lot of people were kind of annoyed by the way it looked, but man, does it play wonderful. It's just a joy to play Mega Man 11, and I'm loving the hell out of it. I don't know if you've played that one.
Uh, yeah, I was somewhat less than fond of how Mega Man 11 played.
Yeah, okay. I enjoyed it, but I know some people don't like it. So there's that. And then, I jump online and still play the Worms games with my friends from time to time. Just on I think they're free or stupid cheap on Steam. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yep. So I think we already got an answer to the. It sounds like you're between the Wii U and the Switch in terms of like favorite console growing up now.
Yeah, it's a weird mix, right? Because I think each one I have a personal love for. And I like that they're doing the classic versions of these systems. Like I have the SNES Classic, and to be able to turn on Donkey Kong Country again and just remember how great that was, you know, and play that is great. The N64, I mean, that was the culmination of, you know, oh man. this is going to be Nintendo's biggest thing ever. And then financially and in the like adult world, it was a bit of a letdown. But to a kid, to like someone my age and my brother's age, a little older, the N64 was just this wonderful thing. And again, there were only maybe about 15 great games on it, but they were really great. And then the Dreamcast again, that some of my favorite games that ever came out were on that, but it wasn't the greatest console in the world. PlayStation 1 and 2 were, the big personal ones for me. But yeah, I'd say you're right. The Switch and the Wii U are definitely the current. I loved the Wii U as a piece of hardware, and I love even more what they did with it in turning it into the Switch. And I hope the Switch carries Nintendo into the future. I was really worried for them. The Wii U didn't do very well, and it's a shame because I really liked it. And then there's Xbox. I mean, being afraid that Microsoft wasn't going to make a good console was kind of a silly thing. I mean, they're Microsoft. I don't like them very much, but they know video games, they know computers, and they made a system that they even duped me into buying one of them. But I'm really not interested in theirs or Sony's next gen consoles at all. There's not much dragging me in. I'd love to be able to play God of War. God of War was a fun type of game when I was in college, but I never owned any of them. My friends had them, and I played them with them. But there's just nothing drawing me in, I guess.
Okay. So like, what influences you in buying a game in the present day? Like, what are your current like sets of criteria?
Well, it's interesting because when I was younger, and especially when I first started working, but when I was younger, it was how many games I could get. And being when I first had money to buy my own games, being a PlayStation era kind of a kid, you weren't wanting for games with Sony's system, right? They published everything. There was a lot of shovelware, there was a lot of good games, and I would just go out and blow whole paychecks on, a bunch of different PlayStation games because I had time. I could sit with a stack of games and play through them in a couple of weeks. Now one game will last me, a year, 6 months. So, I've kind of moved away. I used to be a guy about complexity and length. I wanted, how many buttons on the controller did it use was interesting to me, and how realistic of a simulation of driving cars, is this game with the Gran Turismo series, for example. I even had, the steering wheel and everything for that for a period of time. But, now the criteria is it something I can pick up and play for 15, 20 minutes, an hour, and put it down for a couple of weeks and pick it up and it be just as intuitive. Like I didn't lose anything, by not picking it up. And I don't mean that it has to be a simple game because I still feel Breath of the Wild meets this criteria. I can put down Breath of the Wild for a couple months and turn it back on. And because they kind of polished that Zelda formula of how those games play, I immediately am like, cool, yeah, I was in this part of the forest and I was running around. You know what? Today I'm just going to go and jump on this horse and ride around for a while and just enjoy the scenery. And I can do that. But I feel some games, the learning curve just requires you to be always playing it. And then the, pay to play type of stuff and the additions, like if you didn't get Fortnite the day it came out and started playing Fortnite with everyone, and no qualms about that. If you love Fortnite, go for it. People love that kind of stuff, PUBG and all that. But I've never liked that if I didn't play it like during the beta, I'm not good at it. And now I can't play with anybody. So to me, it's more of a single player or two people sitting on a couch working through a game together type of thing. And I want to be able to pick them up and put them down without it losing anything for me. And that's kind of my big criteria right now. And I think Nintendo has hit that sweet spot for me. The stuff that a young kid and the stuff that an over 30 person with kids would like, they're giving me both of those things.
Okay.
What about you?
Hmm?
What about you?
Oh, for me, well, Well, I wouldn't be so bold as to claim I'm as busy as a dad with a full-time job. You know, since I'm working and focusing on that, usually just the game has to get and keep my interest for a while in order for me to be worth it or have an interesting hook of some kind. Like,
What's
uh,
what's a what's a current example of that? Like what are you currently invested in?
let's see. Currently, well, a few weeks ago when Nintendo was having one of their annual holiday sales, I was able to acquire a little game called Ukulele, made by many people who worked on games back in the Banjo Kazooie days, and that is structured like, well, since it pretty much is Banjo Kazooie, and they've made it as such because Microsoft has Rare and they're not doing anything with it, but it's structured like a traditional, what I guess is known as a collectathon, where kind of sort of like Mario 64 in that it's not like a sequence of levels where you go to this level, then you go to that level, where like all of the things you can get are in like this big world, and you can pretty much just get a specific collectible in any order you want. And yeah, sometimes it's about length. Like one of my games of 2018 that I feel has taken, you know, has found like the art in having a game be a shorter experience is Minute. A
Oh,
black
okay. Where can I find that?
uh I'll just a brief rundown since I just love the game so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
Um I discovered this when Jim Sterling did a bit of a video on it. It's a black and white, vaguely pixel style game where you play this weird duck thing who finds a sword, but he finds out that the sword is cursed and that every 60 seconds, as in 60 real actual seconds, you die and then you respawn wherever like a save point is, like your house. But the way it goes is that you can traverse like the world very fast and establish new like checkpoints basically. And the game is fairly short, but it takes advantage of it since it's every single thing is all major tasks are designed to be completed in but at minimum of one and at like maximum of like 3 minutes. So it really just takes that. A few weeks ago, I bought it. Like the Friday I discovered it was on the Switch, and I ended up beating it the following day because it's a very short game, but it takes advantage of the fact that it's short.
Oh, I'm gonna be buying this game tonight.
Yep.
I've never even heard of it, and I'm surprised I missed it if Jim Sterling talked about it because I a frequenter of that guy. Man, those are two that I hadn't heard of.
Yep.
Good for you, man.
Let's see. My games of the year are either Nintendo or games that are on the Switch, just because like the Switch is just the most convenient thing for me to have. Is
Yep.
The Messenger, which ninja style platforming that yeah, Switch. Well, I won't give it away, but ninja platforming that might remind you of a certain Ninja Gaiden, but with the caveat that it has the visuals of those games of yesterday, but like the precise controls of now.
Ah, I get you.
And let's see. I'm just listing all my games of the year. Is another sort of retro style with the convenience of today is Celeste,
Yes,
which
I've
is
played that one.
an
The game's fantastic.
a monstrously tough game that, and it's just odd. But narratives and platformers are a bit of a rare thing nowadays.
And
Or
it used to be the like all of them for a while, and they've lost it.
yep, and game I recently got as a birthday present was Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu,
Hey,
and
that's my first on my game of the year list. So there we go.
yep. So I haven't like seriously started playing Pokemon until like the early 2010s, but it's been a part of my life since I discovered, like the show and what like the original Game Boy games were.
So it's an interesting thing for me because I missed Pokemon. Like I
Yeah,
was a little bit too old, and I don't mean that I couldn't play it now. You know what I mean? Like I think that if I had really known what Pokemon was, like I should have been playing it since the age I was at when it came out. But I was kind of moving into more of my, you know, hardcore like PlayStation, reading Spawn comics and Pokemon's for kids kind of era of my life. So I never picked it up, but you know, playing, Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Go on my phone for the last year and a half, 2 years is really the only gaming exposure I've ever had to Pokemon. I've seen the show, I've seen the movies, I know what's going on in it, but I'd never played the games. And so to pick this game up and like play through, I'm probably only like an hour or so into it, but I'm going, so this is what Pokemon was? Crap, I missed out. You know what I mean? And I'm really happy that one, they've done such a good job updating it and porting it and kind of, giving it a new visual flourish. I love the way that it, connects with the mobile game. And it's like seeing everything. I remember Nintendo, go as far back as the Game Boy, Super Game Boy, which let you play your Game Boy games in the SNES, and then there was that whole thing where the Game Boy Advance was going to be able to hook up to the GameCube and be a controller, and that never really panned out. They've always been trying to merge all of these different ways of playing games together, and I really feel with the Switch, they've finally gotten there. And this Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee game is really kind of the first really showcase of, what they were trying to do all those years ago. And I think
yep,
it's fantastic. And it's doing really well. So that's even better, you
yes,
know.
indeed.
My I like that you had a couple indie games on there because I'm making a list right now, because I have less time to look things up and get exposure. I took advantage of the virtual console on the Wii a lot, and got a few of those indie games. There's like World of Goo and a few games like that were just wonderful. And what was that really cool black and white one from a few years back? It was on the Wii, or I think it might have been on the Xbox. What was it called? Purgatory. It has a similar name like that. Do you remember the game I'm thinking of?
Limbo.
Limbo. I loved that game. And you're reminding me of Celeste, which I have played, which is definitely on my list. And I have Smash Brothers on there because any year a Smash Brothers game comes out is a good year. And I've never really been hardcore into it, as in, it's still a game that if I play it with other people, I usually get my butt handed to me.
Hmm.
I'm not that great at it, but I've always loved them. And I really love the single player spirit adventure mode they have going on in this. It's kind of a fighting game blended with RPG elements in it. It's cool. And I haven't got to play them because I don't have the consoles, but I really will say that the PS4 Spider-Man and God of War are two of my games of the year just on the Let's Plays that I've watched of them. Haven't got a chance to play them, but they're not my cup of tea as much. Spider-Man, I would really wish was on the Switch because I'd love to play that. But it's cool to see the God of War games evolve into, they were kind of like, bruising, half side scroller, half 3D. Final Fight kind of games that also had a story. And it's cool to see them kind of evolve into a very story based, very poignant story based kind of a game. So that's what I got. What else did I cut you to? Could I cut you off before you could finish your list? I apologize.
Um, yeah, Smash Bros. Is definitely on my list of games of the year. I remember being like supremely excited when I realized that, like, one of my favorite video game characters ever, Isabelle from the Animal Crossing
Oh
series, was a
yeah.
playable character. Not only that, but she is, pretty separate from the villager in terms of moves, and just, yeah, I doubt I'll ever get into Smash competitively, but if I ever find myself at a tournament like Evo, I will try my darndest to make her one of my main fighters.
Is she your favorite one? I haven't opened her yet, but I imagine that she's great.
Yep. Her and the Inkling are my current
Oh
favorites.
yeah, the Inkling is awesome. I don't have Splatoon 2, so I wanted to put a Splatoon game on my game of the year list, but I realized how long ago Splatoon 1 came out. And and I haven't tried Splatoon 2, but I had so much. Splatoon 1 is the exact kind of game if it's going to be an online game, that's the kind of game I want it to be. Like I don't feel like I'm at a severe disadvantage even though I'm not that great at it. Like I feel like I still have a blast,
Hmm.
where you're not just showing up and then, someone just levels the board, like what happens in some other games. Um, in fact, as a whole, I really like what Nintendo's been doing with their online stuff since the Wii U. I know that people are annoyed, that the Switch's online costs money, but it's not expensive. And number two, if it's getting me access to great ports, the NES Netflix, as they call it, it's very limited in game quantity, but the ports are fantastic. I don't know if you have that booted up yet, but even a game as simple and silly as NES Golf, the fact that it plays and sounds and looks so well, and I can just turn it on the go or put it up on my TV and HDMI is really cool, and it makes me smile.
Okay.
So what about? I'll start with asking you a question, because you've been asking them all this time, and I think you wanted to move into the looking forward to for 2019 games, or did you want me to talk about as introducing my kids to games first?
Yeah, so I know I don't know as many, parents who themselves play games who also
Oh, okay.
either have kids or are going to have kids, and like they intend to introduce that to them. So, when your kids eventually reach that, period of, physical and emotional development, as they say in the teacher schools,
Yes.
do you have a specific, like, do you ever have like a list of games in your brain that you intend to introduce them to, or how do you think you'll introduce your kids to games once they're able to get their hands on them?
Oh, absolutely. So, first off, for parents listening to this, and for you who works with kids, I could say that anything you intend to do or put into place kind of falls out the window based on kid to kid. My daughter uh, has an autism spectrum diagnosis, and so stimulations and things of that nature, um, you know we've had to kind of adjust our intention. So things like we were going to do minimal screen time and not have a lot of television until she got a little older, have kind of gone to the wayside. So we've been injecting those a bit. We let her watch, kid learning videos on YouTube, and we got her a Leap Pad, which has like little silly video games and things that are, there to help, her with her development. And, her ABA specialists and people working with her really like that stuff. And my brother has always given, like stuffed animals of Mario and Yoshi. and we have these things around. And, you know, I didn't realize she knew who the characters were. And, you know, I get Smash Brothers and I turn it on Christmas Day. And she goes, "Oh, look, it's Mario. Daddy, you got to use Mario." And I'm like, "All right, this is awesome. Like, I'm doing something right." And then she called a turtle at the Museum of Science the other day Bowser. And again, like these are things that, like, it's not like we're sitting down, you know, jamming these things down her throat. She's just picked them up. You know what I mean? And she's only three and a half, you know, and it's amazing to me. So we already have those, but you know, to me, like I already touched on it. Um, I'd really love my kids to, you know, I really think Labo is like a cool next generation thing that I can do with my children. I'm a big Lego guy that kind of moves into the same ballpark of you build this, and not only is playing with it the fun part, but building it is the fun part. You know, and I think that fits in with the hand-eye coordination of learning how to play games. I have this Wii game called The Dog Island. Have you ever heard of this thing?
I think so.
It was this weird Japanese RPG that just decided to release it in the United States, and it's not the greatest language translation in the world and anything like that, but it it's a really fun, like almost point and click type of RPG, but also they just have very simplified controls, and it's a pretty straightforward, you know, adventure RPG, but all of the characters are dogs and really adorable, like big headed, you know, cartoonish looking dogs. And I turn that game on and she just stands in front of the TV and loves every second. Make the doggy go over there. Make the doggy go on the boat. Look, it's a pirate doggy. Wow, look at the doggies. You know, and it's so getting the idea of what those games are. I've already started, but you know, if I had to make a list, you know, I wish I had an Atari because I feel like a lot of those games, like the Pongs and the things like that with the simple one direction movements, would be really good. Something introduced to your kids, but she already recognizes Mario, and what better way to get her in to, you know, video games than, you know, like an old side scrolling Mario game, right? So I'd say the Mario's, the early NES classics, anything colorful, you know, eye catching with a lot going on. You know, kind of the same way I got into it. You know, why not? Why it worked for me. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I also, it would be cool to also go and dig up some of the like educational game attempts. Like Mario is Missing was always a fun one. Um, I don't know if there were any console versions of it, but Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? I had a few versions of that on my computer. And I don't know, were you a child of Carmen Sandiego, or was that just before you?
I remember watching the game shows as a kid.
Yeah. So they had video game tie-ins for them, which were really cool. Um, and so yeah, that's as a dad, you know, I think it's a very important part of popular culture. And you know, I think we're blurring the line because of everyone having a tablet in their pocket. You know what I mean? So games are more apparent. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just think, you know, just like with everything else, anything in anything that becomes too much of your life is can be a negative thing. I find myself, you know, getting lost in, you know, movies, you know, probably more often than I should as well, and you know, games and talking about them. So you just gotta, you know, do things in moderation, right? You know, I as someone that works with kids, I'm sure you understand that. So you said you're a teacher for
Yep.
nurse preschool.
Yes.
You say you're in Danvers? Is that where you said you were?
N- No,
Or am I wrong?
no, just around the Bostonish neighborhood.
Very cool, dude. That's awesome. I just you know, didn't mean to bring that up during the cast, but I didn't know that about you until we started talking. So I think that's amazing. You know, as a dad, I think it's awesome to be talking to someone that, you know, their life is dedicated to helping kids get up on the straight and narrow. And I can't imagine dealing with multiple children all day. It's hard enough with one toddler, man.
Yeah, it can be. So, are there Any games that you're particularly looking forward to in the coming year?
Well, yeah, so I really hope, and I don't think it will, just because of how silly Square can be, but I hope I get to play Kingdom Hearts 3 because I loved those games and they didn't end up on my list because they came into my life in a weird time where I wasn't as gaming as hardcore, so I didn't get to play them as much as I'd like, but I love the idea of this weird, bizarro. Is it canon in the Final Fantasy universe or is it not? And are these Disney things just characters or do the films exist in this world? Kind of mix between Disney and JRPGs that I didn't think the world wanted and ended up loving. And now we've got, what are there like outside of the main two? There's like 4 or 5 different versions of each game on different consoles,
Yep.
and now we have this third one that just looks bonkers. Like I'm pretty excited about it. I don't know about you.
Yes, I've recently started to get into the Kingdom Hearts series, and my goodness, what a roller coaster the first one
Oh
is.
man, it is a trip. It is an absolute trip. There's that. There's a. I hear a rumor that because it was fan funded, that Shenmue 3 might actually be happening. And if so, I will find a way to have that game because Shenmue was my life. I did you ever play Shenmue?
No.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I know the basics of it.
Oh, it was just it was really the first game I ever played where it was time based, and if you know today is November 12th, and you're meeting with a guy on November 14th, so you actually have to wait 2 days within the game, which was something like 40 minutes or something like that. But either way, you had to wait till that day. And so, like, to do, what do you do? Well, you can go find quests to do, or you can go hang out at the arcade and play old Sega games. And, then you have a curfew, so you have to be home at 11 at night. It was just such a strange, like, living world that this game existed in. And I loved it. And I never played the second one, but I watched a playthrough of it. And the cool thing the second one did is because no one had a Dreamcast anymore, when the second game came out, they actually sold a DVD with it that explained it was like the movie of the first game. So they just stitched all the cutscenes together basically. And that was a cool way to do it. And I hope they do that with the third one because I guess game 1 and 2 is something like 26 chapters of a 100 chapter novel that the guy who created it wrote. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually finish it up. Um, Another thing is I hear rumor that there's a Switch Pokemon canon RPG coming out this year, or at least rumored to be coming out this year. And if that's the case, now that I'm all of a sudden a Pokemon fan, I I hope to pick that up, and maybe it'll be a Detective Pikachu tie-in. Who knows? We'll get like Ryan Reynolds to voice him in the game.
Uh,
So speaking of that, was it Jim Sterling or Film Critic Hulk? I think it was Film Critic Hulk on Twitter was posting that he had never played a Pokemon game and
oh yeah,
only
I
kind
saw
of
that
knew.
today.
So he named his Pikachu in Let's Go Pikachu Ryan Reynolds. And so the game will say like you and Ryan Reynolds are enjoying a wonderful day. And he's like, this game is amazing. And the one other one I had to add on there, and I'm sure you're going to come up with ones that I've forgotten and not thinking of, is I I'm a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro, and I'm a huge fan of Hideo Kojima, and I'm super bummed about what happened with Konami, and I really wanted to see their Silent Hill game. And this Death Stranding game that seems to have grown out of that garbage fire that happened there sounds amazing. And again, I don't have a console where I'll be able to play it, but I'm really excited to see what it is and how it pans out. So that's my list.
Yeah,
What about you?
let's see. I don't have a list mainly But I do have a few of my previous guests, I believe, have games that are coming out at some point this year. I
Oh,
think
awesome.
I think that this year is when they bring up the final Shovel Knight DLC,
Oh, so good.
and my goodness, like, Shovel Knight has been a delight from start to finish.
It really, really is. I need to I need to play more. It's just wonderfully put together.
It's something I'm very much looking forward to is Doom Eternal, which I realized through like one of their press videos will be coming out to the Switch the same as the rest of the versions.
Oh, I need that. I I actually love the port of the newest Doom game on the Switch. I have that. I got it similarly to what you were saying. I got it for super sale, I think last year during Nintendo's post-holiday sales. And it's just number one, I can't believe Nintendo's made a console that can push that game because they're always so far behind.
Yeah,
And two, it just plays fantastic and the online works really well. Like that's the other thing I was really surprised with. And Doom Eternal just looks wonderful. Doom has been a very interesting series, you know, that it's stuck
yeah,
around for so long is really impressive. Um, and that they've, have they rebooted it 3 times? Wasn't like Doom 3 kind of a reboot?
I
And then
believe
there
so.
was and then there was like the Doom reboot in the early 2000s and then the more recent Doom reboot. I mean, if you have something that works, just do it, right? I mean, I'm glad for them.
Yeah.
You can't really beat uh, alien hell beasts. Hey, okay, I'm down.
And I think even though it's a port, it is coming to the Switch this year. The Square Enix is bringing quite a few of the classic Final Fantasies, and I'm looking forward to finally hooking up Final Fantasy VII directly to my veins.
Oh, have you ever played it?
I think I know for a fact my brother has, and he's played through a whole bunch of the Final Fantasies, but I never have, and now that it's coming to the Switch, that's gonna be like a definitive purchase.
Oh yeah, it's just a wonderful game. And I've gone back and played it. When people say that it doesn't hold up, and okay, yeah, it's clunky. It's got the early PlayStation. We're pushing more than the system can actually handle graphics out of it. But man, it's just so dense. There's so much going on. It's the perfect blend of the Final Fantasy aesthetic, but with the ultra, steampunky futuristic thing they started going towards that I didn't really quite like how far they went with it into Final Fantasy VIII, but I still enjoy that game. It's just not really the same. But Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX are like the definitive 3D Final Fantasies to me. Um, and I'm really excited if they bring out Final Fantasy VI because that's one that I've actually never played and heard it's fantastic. Um, it's I think one of the few that I haven't played.
Yep, those are the main games I'm looking forward to this year.
Oh, that's awesome.
And now we can move on to the question that all of my guests always understand perfectly, and there's never any sort of confusion. So,
Okay.
so yeah, in your opinion, Chris, as a player and purveyor of video games, is video games?
I was contemplating this when I saw this written here because I see as you're laughing that you were being sarcastic there about it never confusing anyone, but this is an existential question, as it were. um, is video games So I would read that as if you're looking at it and it plays, because video to me would be something that's playing autonomously, like a movie. Is it exclusively a game or exclusively a video? And then you ponder, what does that mean to me? I mean, Netflix just released Bandersnatch and they're claiming that's a game or a choose your own adventure movie, which I haven't watched or played it as they'd put it. So, I mean, is video games not exclusively, but games can be videos? Is that a reasonable answer?
I'd say so.
Okay. When I read that, I thought about, you ever seen the Muppets Take Manhattan?
I think so.
Kermit goes to work for these two like corporate frogs at one point, and or is that the part? No, there's a character. Sorry, I'm scrambling it. But there's a part where a guy says, "Peoples is peoples. Frogs is not peoples. You have peoples, you have frogs. Peoples, frogs." And it's like, is this an existential thing you're getting at here? Like it, and they just kind of leave it at that. And I'm probably misquoting it, but it's always stuck with me. It's like, what's the meaning behind this? I don't know. Have what type of answers you usually get for this?
It honestly depends on the type of person I'm asking. Some people interpret it as like a literal, like, face value question and just give a yes or no. Other people can, just talk about the merits of video games as an entertainment medium.
Or an
It's
art form, does that matter?
yes, of really all kinds of answers. Yeah.
Awesome. So hey, a question for you. Uh where where'd the name for your show come from?
Oh goodness, now
I love the logo, by the way.
that requires a bit of an explanation.
And if you've explained it before on here, I apologize. But I
That's fine.
I don't know it. So
Uh, this is based off of a reoccurring gag on a. So I'm just explaining it. There's a video game show that has formed a quite sizable online community that I'm a part of. Video Games Awesome, and
okay.
like the two primary hosts, Fraser and Becky. So basically, like very high quality streaming. One of the things they regularly do is they have Minecraft build challenges where the people in the community join a specialized server that they make and build things to a particular theme. Way back in, I think, 2015, it was our annual Christmas build. We build something suitable to the holidays. And when I wasn't, I was primarily just, helping people build resources because, a point of pride Fraser makes in his shows is that if you ever see one, everything you've seen is, built manually in the classic and the regular Minecraft styles, and nothing is like only Fraser gets like the creative mode powers, so we can like fly around and see everything in a timely manner. And so while I was thinking of what to build, I just for reasons that I can't remember, I had quite a few pumpkins. I built like a house out of pumpkins and then got some black wool and made the propeller and then put a whole bunch of odd levers inside and then put some reefs to the side of it, so that it would actually be holiday themed. And as soon he flew by it, examined it, checked it out, and they called it the Pumpkin Copter. Now, what was what no one saw, because this was apart from the show, is that many of the people in this community, like the communities that formed from the show, like now we use Discord, but then we used Skype. And as I went into a Skype call with my friends, like after the show had wrapped up, two of the moderators at the time, Silent and Melly, just laughed just because of how ridiculous that was. That was my contribution to a holiday themed build challenge. They pretty much insisted that I have to build it in some way, shape, or form in future Minecraft builds, and I kind of have just taking a joke that already wasn't funny and just beating it into the ground until it's somehow funny again.
Awesome.
And around the time I got the idea to make this podcast, a friend of mine, Pesky Plumber, who's a freelance illustrator, and I showed him one of my Minecraft interpretations of the Pumpkin Copter, and basically the only instructions I gave him was to give the Pumpkin Copter the same, height proportions of the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and that is
Yes.
how the Pumpkin Copter has its current shape. And the idea behind my building it the first time would be, what if a crazy person had a TARDIS, and what would it look like?
So
And
then, if you go that far with what if a crazy person had a TARDIS and it looks like this, and it's a pumpkin copter, then when you open up said pumpkin copter, what does it look like inside?
oh goodness, if Fraser and Becky ever appear on my show, I look forward to explaining this to them, because again, in quite a few of the Minecraft challenges, the pumpkin copter has made an appearance, and Fraser doesn't find it funny, but I find it funny that he doesn't find it funny, which is
Right,
why I've
exactly.
beaten the joke into a paste at this point. And I decided, why not just call it the Pumpkin Copter Cast, since this is my show.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Chris Chipman for joining me tonight,
Absolutely.
this morning. Yeah, if any of the -7 people watching this have enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe. On the rare occasions I post anything worth listening to, you can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83. And Chris, is there anything you wish to plug before we sign off?
I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this, you already know it's Tyler, right?
Yes.
For some reason, my brain was going to Teddy. It's really late. Don't mind me. You already know Tyler's stuff, but please, give him the likes, give him the watches, share this around. If you're coming here because you know me, and please also, follow Tyler's stuff, and I, look at my stuff as well. The Chippa made this on YouTube. The Chipman Brothers Tangent with my brother, Movie Bob, Creating Geeks with my wife, Sarah, Shooting the Shit with Chippa, and Talkbuster Podcast. And if you like podcasts like this, I've been sharing a lot of stuff from people like Tyler and other people who have had me on their shows. So check all those guys out. This really has been a pleasure, and I'd love to do this again sometime if you had a topic of interest. So I really appreciate it.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. And yeah, thank you. This has been the Pumpkin Copter Cast, the only video game show And we will see you next time.